What is up, everybody? Welcome to my channel. I am DJ, aka Took a Black Guy, and for the first time, hit that like button, subscribe button. So, as you know, I went and saw Alien Romulus over the past weekend. Really enjoyed the movie. Check out my movie review of it. Talked about it. I gave it a 7.5 rating. Love the movie. But I've watched pretty much all the Alien films over the years. It's been a while since I've watched them, so there's probably some things I probably missed and stuff in the movie, as far as like Easter eggs or certain things that reference certain stuff that I probably missed for the most part. But as always, we got Mr. Eric Voss from New Rockstars to break it down for us. So this is Alien Romulus, break down Easter eggs and details you missed. Make sure you go to New Rockstars channel. They always do these very good deep dives and breakdowns of different shows and movies. So I really appreciate them and all the work they do for fans like us to get the stuff that we miss and don't understand and explain it to us. So without further ado, let's check it out. Bring this up. Here we go.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of Alien Romulus, the 2024 film directed by Fede Alvarez, taking place between the first 1979 Alien film and 1986's Aliens. And
I do want to go back and watch
Alien film, since it is filled with references and homages to every film of the franchise, with incredible production design and attention to detail, and even some updates to the biology and the lore of the xenomorph, and how it connects to the black goo of Prometheus and Covenant. So let's break down everything you might have missed in Alien Romulus, and trust me, there are some incredible details that you probably missed in this movie. Okay, the opening 20th Century Studios logo suddenly glitches yellow-green and then corrodes away. From dark space comes a Weyland-Yutani probe ship. A red light blinks and a red screen blinks on by itself. Echo Probe 203, tight in the same curved typeface, white on red, as the early shot from 1979's Alien. Nostromo, 1809-24-609. In the 1979 film, Mother's text flows on the visor of a space helmet. Now it glows on this triangular eyepiece of whatever program runs this probe ship. But now we actually see the text of Mother, because we know what Mother really means. Mother 9001 waking up. So Mother is the name of the artificial intelligence mainframe used by Weyland-Yutani. It was Mother 6000 in the 1979 Alien set in 2122, and then it was upgraded to Mother 9000 for this era 20 years later in 2142. We see so that 20 years on the screen here. 9 February 2142. We are in the Zeta 2 Reticuli system. Zeta Reticuli is an actual binary star system visible in the southern hemisphere on Earth. Both stars have similar characteristics to our sun, and it's located about 39.3 light years from Earth. The Echo probe enters a debris field with Nostromo visible on a piece of fuselage. The Nostromo was the ship in the 1979 film that was hauling a refinery with mineral ore that, when redirected by Mother to LV-426, aka Acheron, to gather samples of the alien specimen, Kane was infected by a facehugger, leading to the deadly tragedy in which Ripley had to detonate the entire ship and even blow the xenomorph out the airlock of the escape craft with a harpoon. But now we learn that these xenomorphs can apparently cocoon themselves in space and survive. The official soundtrack by composer Benjamin Wallfish calls this opening music the chrysalis. So presumably that was the script's word for this thing that the Echo probe intercepts. In biological science, a chrysalis refers to the hardened outer protective layer of a pupa when butterflies go from pupa to adult. You know, basically what Metapod or Kakuna are in Pokemon terms. Actually, this film establishes a wetter pupal stage in the xenomorph life cycle, something that we actually had not seen previously. Only really took place off-screen in the 1979.
Oh, it never showed up before?
Chest bursters represent the larval stage, and then those chest bursters scamper off, they molt, and then they form this cocoon or chrysalis, in which they rapidly grow into the large adult xenomorph warrior stage. But in this instance, the xenomorph adults can also survive in space by generating an even harder chrysalis and living for decades, which should make all of us
like
worried about the alien queen that Ripley shoots out into space in Aliens. After the Weyland-Yutani scientists grab one of these things, and we see from this fossilized insides of the chrysalis that that's definitely a xenomorph, we smash cut to the word alien. And as the letters of Romulus trickle in, the letters A, L, I, E, and N disassemble back into single lines, a reversal of the way the letters assembled in the opening titles of the 1979 film. So we meet Rain Carradine, played by Kaylee Spinney, enjoying a sunrise on the planet Imaga. Imaga is the heavenly destination sought by these characters. characters.
Just
and
like
in the real world, Ivaga is the name given to a planet orbiting the star HD 63765 in the Carina constellation. Ivaga means sky or heaven in the language of Guarani, which is an indigenous Paraguayan language, and the Milky Way was known as the road to Ivaga. Rain wakes up from this dream to see Rain on the window looking out at what is a giant nuclear atmosphere generator for the Jackson Star mining colony. An announcement over the PA system warns mining workers that if they have a cough, they must quarantine and report themselves. Sprinkled throughout this movie are details pointing to the human workers getting aerial sicknesses as a result of toiling on these alien surfaces with microbes that our bodies are not evolved to handle,
which makes sense
of why the Renaissance space station conducted its work. Andy, David Johnson, greets Rain with a joke.
Best character and actor in the whole show in the movie.
Space. Andy is an android. That's probably where he got his name. Reprogrammed by Rain's father to be a surrogate brother. His joke here about the claustrophobic astronaut who needed space sets up the drama to come. It's a claustrophobic horror story that releases attention by freeing Rain from the grip of the offspring.
She really should have played Ellie.
Space.
She looks just, I mean,
follows Rain and Andy through the mining colony. Population 2781, distance from Earth 65 light years, hours of daylight per year
zero. That would drive me
later
crazy.
On the screen that this is the Alpheus system. We learn that Rain's parents died of Lyme disease in the mines, which is caused by a specific bacteria that normally is carried by ticks, and it makes you wonder what other kind of parasitic insects are they exposed to in these mines. Rain asks the Weyland-Yutani clerk if she has met her quota. Now on the personnel screen, we see that she was born on February 18th, 2121, which is right around the Nostromo incident. Her full name is Marie
about 20 years old.
Carradine, which tells us that she goes by the nickname from her mother's maiden name, I have to assume, if her middle name is her mother's maiden name.
That's her real name.
Raises Rain's quota from 12,000
that was messed up, man.
24,000 hours. Seemingly random, but perhaps this is triggered by the mention of Rain's parents and the fact that they were listed on her screen and how they actually might have died with some time left on their contracts. Basically, all these workers are indentured servants for the company.
But said they increased the time, so yeah.
Her ex-boyfriend Tyler, played by Archie Renault, and she takes Andy out to see the group, including Kay, Isabella Merced, who's Tyler's sister, Bjorn, played by Spike Fern, who's Tyler and Kay's hothead cousin, whose mother actually died when a synthetic trapped her in a mine when there was a fuel line rupture to spare the other miners, and then Navarro, Aileen Wu, Bjorn's girlfriend.
To save
Tyler explains how in the orbit above the planet they picked up a signal, and then Bjorn interrupts, joking and going beep, 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 which is the same kind of cadence of beeps of the signal picked up by the Nostromo to redirect to LV-426 in the 1979 film. Meanwhile, Andy plays a computer game that involves a shooter progressing behind logs, killing these crawling aliens that look a lot like facehuggers. Later, Tyler explains that he got his knowledge about firearms from games and magazines, and I think this might be one of the video games that he and Bjorn had played. They plan to use Andy, a Weyland-Yutani synthetic who can access all doors, to break into this derelict decommissioned space station in orbit to steal cryopods that would allow them to make the 9-year journey to Ivaga. This movie actually begins with them not needing Rain for any actual function on this mission. They're just using her because Andy won't go anywhere without her. But despite her tag-along status, she actually ends up being the final survivor of this movie. Outside, Rain sees a group of older miners bringing in a canary in a cage, the proverbial canary.
I mean, like, that's kind of like old school tactics.
Are all being thrown into the dark to recover this mineral ore. And yeah, it's probably the same kind of mineral ore that the Nostromo was toting.
This far in the future we had better detection systems.
In the cockpit behind Navarro are some examples of semiotic standard. These are the series of symbols invented by Ron Cobb, production designer of the 1979 Alien film, to conceive of visual ways for humans in space of this world to label different parts of ships. And it's such a cool little piece of sci-fi production design that a lot of production designers on film since then have adopted. Like in the 2010 Sam Rockwell movie Moon, and even in Loki Season 2, above the hatch that leads to the Loom observation deck. These symbols that we see translate to hazard/warning and astronic systems, aka electronics. And behind the cockpit, we see this triangle that means bridge, because that's what they're on here, the bridge. As Navarro fires up the Corbalon, various screens show the different parts of the ship,
details like that you appreciate.
The piles of the mineral, just to kind of set up the geography that will become important in the final act of the movie. And Rain sees the sun of Jackson
I love
Star
the visual of the planet scenes.
But it gets eclipsed by the darkness of the space station.
Pause there. I'm a big, I love space and everything, but like, you give me a good visual of a planet with some rings, I love it, because Saturn, one of my favorite planets. I love a ring planet. So those visuals, and later on you'll see when they're going down into the ice ring, the ship's going to crash. I love those scenes.
And this is the Renaissance station of the Weyland-Yutani Company, and it's divided into two modules, the Romulus and the Remus, named after the legendary founders of Rome. Romulus and Remus were brothers who were orphaned and raised by a wolf mother on the banks of the Tiber River. Andy follows Tyler and Bjorn into the hatch, and he touches a hook harness before Bjorn snaps at him. This will be the same cable that Rain will use in the final act to tether herself when the offspring is attacking her. It seems like Fede Alvarez is trying to do what James Cameron did in the opening act of Aliens and just set up every little detail that will become important in the final scuffle right there in the opening act. We see that they use the same M314 motion tracker that the Colonial Marines used in 1986's Aliens, and they climb into the vent hatch and realize from this floating dead rat that the gravity generators are malfunctioning. I like how this movie in multiple times uses an actual lab rat to kind of convey to the viewer what will be happening to the humans in this movie. They reach the pods, but they realize they only have 3.2 years of charge and they need 9, so they look for more cryo fuel. And throughout this film, we're hearing some orchestral flourishes. The composer sampled Jerry Goldsmith's theme from Alien, James Horner's theme from Aliens, Mark Streitenfeld's theme from Prometheus,
I'm gonna have me an Alien marathon this weekend.
Entry of the Gods into Valhalla from Richard Wagner's Das Rheingold featured prominently in Alien Covenant. The guys enter the central part of the Renaissance, where an automated voice explains the station's separate modules of Romulus and Remus, and Bjorn notices this painting. This is Michel Serret's view of the Hotel de Ville of Marseille during the Plague of 1720. And notice that we're hearing the Wagner music from Alien Covenant in this moment, as the voice explains the lab's purpose is to improve the quality of human life. But Bjorn focuses on the part of Serret's painting in which bodies of plague victims are being piled up, and one living baby tries to breastfeed from his
that kind of foreshadows.
So obviously this foreshadows the Renaissance's mission of curing human ailments using the black goo, as Weyland-Yutani concluded that human bodies were too frail for space colonization and too prone to diseases, probably after the 101-year-old Peter Weyland, looking for a way to stave off death, had this happen to him from an engineer. But also the breastfeeding imagery foreshadows the way the offspring will be suckling from the corpse of Kay in the final act, draining the life of this cursed woman. Bjorn tells Andy that he won't be joining them in the cryopods, something Rain had kept from him, and Bjorn says no fake people allowed, but Andy responds, I prefer the term artificial person myself, which is a nod to Bishop's line in Aliens.
It's just common practice. We always have a synthetic on board.
I prefer the term artificial person myself.
So they enter the genetics lab, and there's a top half of a synthetic
I haven't watched
that
them
has
so
been
long.
corroded
I didn't
with
catch
xenomorph
that.
acid lying beside a hole. And notice that this android is wearing the same light blue and white science officer uniform that a guy named Ash wore in Alien. So, you know, that should be a clue. Now, the semiotic standard on the cryo chamber door translates to cryogenic vault, but the head is missing on that part of the symbol, so that's ominous. And then the next one is refrigeration, followed by hazard. And as they try to snatch one of the cryopods, that triggers a lockdown, because no one would want these facehuggers to fall out and be able to escape.
Huggers were different, man.
His awesome X-ray torch, MK017, while Rain pries out the credential disc from the science officer android, and they plug it into Andy's drive, but he tenses up to reboot, and it's such a creepy pose. It looks like he's like in a kind of prayerful pose to his god, Peter Weyland, as his eyes roll over back to show the Weyland-Yutani logo on the back of his eyeball.
I didn't even realize that. That's crazy.
Choose now to attack. It's horrifying. Tyler is able to fend them off initially with just this prodding stick, and you may be asking, wait, facehuggers should be a lot deadlier and resilient, right? Well, yes, in past Alien movies, they are far more ferocious, but in this scene, I think they're still waking up from cryosleep.
I mean, I thought they were
humans were joking earlier that you feel
movie.
hungover after cryosleep, and these facehuggers seem a little sluggish here, but they get far more vicious as the movie goes on.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's this great shot that follows a crawling facehugger as it crawls toward a passed out Tyler, and it jumps on his face, but Andy grabs it by the tail at the last second.
Now,
his programming is kicked in
this
with the
Andy,
sudden knowledge
man.
that the tail would be the safest way to grab these things. So they're able to get through the hatch, but one leaps through at the last second. Bjorn bats it, but then feeling a momentary confidence, he looks over to see, uh-oh, all the rest are immediately with their little fingers prying through the crack. So they're able to get back to the inner lab room, but once again, one leaps through at the last second, catching Navarro on the face. Not sure what to do, they plug in the other synthetic, and it is, wait a minute, Ash, is that you? No, this is Science Officer Rook, which is another android named after a chess piece.
They
like
all
Bishop,
look like it.
with the voice and the likeness of the late Ian Holm, who passed away in 2020, but he's voiced by actor Daniel Betts. According to Fede Alvarez, they created the effect with animatronics built to resemble Ian Holm, but I'm pretty sure some VFX were definitely used here. Alvarez says that he did contact Holmes' estate and got the blessing of his widow. I've gone into this in other videos, and it's still not crazy when studios do do this.
Your dead family member.
What are you going to ask someone's great-great-grandkid if they're okay, if their great-great-grandfather could be in a movie? It's impossible for any actor to know who all of their descendants will be, and whether those descendants might be dirtbags who just want like a quick payout to the estate by a movie studio. Unless the actor puts it into writing that they are okay that the movie will do this with their likeness in some future sequel, I don't think getting the blessing of their widow is enough. Anyway, above their heads, somehow missed the entire time they were in this lab, hangs the XX-121 Xenomorph, which was Rook's name for the Xenomorph aboard the Nostromo. We even see the harpoon that Ripley shot at it, still skewered in its body. We see an employee file for Kane, played by John Hurt from the 1979 film. He's the one who got infected and brought the Xenomorph aboard the Nostromo. Rook explains that they found this XX-121 in space, saying the lack of oxygen and food are no true consequence to this perfect organism. A perfect organism.
I will say
was exactly how Ash described the Xenomorph in the
animation or the
film.
CGI on him was kind of weird.
You're dealing with the perfect organism.
So they're able to freeze the facehugger off, but Navarro and Bjorn get back to the Corvalon despite Andy trying to stop them, and the chestburster bursts, causing the Corvalon to crash into the hangar. The filmmakers have gotten a bit more nuanced over the decades when it comes to the puppet prosthetics, and I like that they include little details like an additional membrane sliding off the chestburster's head, and rather than rising out of the chest cavity and scampering away, the chestburster here looks a bit more lethargic, like a newborn baby, a true larval stage. And I think that's designed to set up the fact that they're going to have this additional pupil stage. Andy explains to Rain and Tyler that the facehuggers respond to sound and heat signature, so they decide to raise the temperature of the room to human body heat to try to be invisible to them, but that would also mean that they can't get nervous or stressed. In this sequence, we get to see Betty Alvarez's experience on the film Don't Breathe come through, because this is largely the premise of that movie. Kay finds the molted husk of the chestburster, similar to Brett finding the skin in the 1979 film, but now we see a stage that we had not seen before, the chrysalis, as the chestburster cocoons into adult xenomorph warrior. Now, sexual imagery certainly went into H.R. Giger's original creature designs, and there's certainly a vaginal appearance.
I was about to say the same thing,
especially
like
when
JJ
Bjorn tries to abort this thing by shoving the prod inside of that orifice.
He said abort,
but it ends up dripping
that bad boy
on him and killing him. The way Fede Alvarez shoots this xenomorph hatching is just so effective because he focuses on close-ups of like the hands, the fingers,
unfurling,
the top of the head as it crowns.
And it's all like
and the
practical effects.
Unfold and open up slowly.
I thought that was so cool.
And we know Nosferatu inspired the original blocking and the design in the 1979 film. We see smaller claws that must be the xenomorph's feet, which I think might be the first time we see a xenomorph's feet in close-up. Trevor Newland plays the xenomorph in this film. So the others, meanwhile, just vicariously feeling the fear of Kay in this moment, start sweating bullets, so they have to run. Andy closes the door, perfect timing, nearly locking Tyler out, but he says that he actually calculated Tyler's running speed more effectively than he did for Bjorn and Navarro.
Yeah, they missed the part where it was what's her name calling them.
Because think about it, every time a facehugger got in through the door, it was when the narrowest gap was left open after the last human came through. So it really needed to be that tight in order for them to survive and progress. We see a quick wide external shot of the Renaissance from space outside, where the Remus module is dated 2112 and the Romulus module is dated 2130 something. So that tells us that Weyland-Yutani built the Remus part before, between Alien Covenant, which was in 2104, and the events of the first Alien film in 2122, and then they built the Romulus part after the Nostromo incident in 2122. Andy refuses to open the door to let Kay through, and she gets snatched away by the Xenomorph. Rain asks, "How could you do that?" And Andy responds, "What, leave someone behind?" Normal Andy's programming never would have held it over Rain that she was going to leave him behind on her way to Ivaga, but this new programming gives him like a guilt trip drive to make him more emotionally
I like that version of Andy better.
At the secure Romulus lab, where we hear the voice of Mother in this movie, and Mother is voiced by Anne-Marie Griggs, who's actually the film's visual effects producer. She also did VFX for Birds of Prey and the 2016 Deadpool film. We learn about Compound Z01 or Z01. That's the name given to the black goo from Prometheus and Alien Romulus, the bioweapon created by the engineers to break down and reform the DNA structure of living organisms. The engineers used this to create life on Earth billions of years ago, but disappointed by their experiment of mankind, planned to use this bioweapon to kill us. There's even a deleted scene from the script in Prometheus where the engineer would have spoken in this old language to David and implied that even Jesus Christ was a figure that the engineers put there to try to educate humanity, and we just murdered him. But the android David
why did they get rid of that Jesus scene? I really, that would have been a good scene to add.
Who had to C-section out of her a squid-like fetus abomination, an abomination that rapidly grew and latched onto the last engineer to implant a seed that hatched out as a deacon. Then an alien Covenant, David unleashed his compound on an engineer city and experimented with the compound and with body parts harvested from Shaw's corpse to create a perfect organism, which became that movie's version of the xenomorphs, the neomorphs.
Yeah,
but to be clear, David did not invent all the xenomorphs, at least as they were in the 1979 film. Those eggs were carried by a different engineer, the space jockey, whose origin and story we don't fully know. But David was trying to continue the work of the engineers to create a bioweapon in the image of a perfect organism, which was really a mythological ideal that they were trying to recapture. Because there was an engraving that we saw in the Prometheus film. The design of the xenomorph was really something known to the engineers from their own distant past. The engineers were not the original gods. They were also created by someone else. And they might have even been a genetic aberration descended from a race of hunters and conquerors that looked like xenomorphs that they admired as gods or even feared as demons. The truth is,
weird.
I want to. It seems like with this franchise, we were coming full circle with that mythological cycle. So we learned the Weyland-Yutani
I want to dive more into the lore of this world.
From the XX121 xenomorph, we see a 3D printed form of even the ceatite ampule vases that we saw in Prometheus. These are the vases that contain the black goo as a kind of chemical warhead shell. We see a screen with a test rat, and on the side it says source LV426 and Acheron. I might be wrong, but it might be the first time we've seen Acheron on screen, because it was not on screen at any point in the 1979 film, but that was the original name of the planet for the film. I think it was in the script. Rook describes the goo as a non-Newtonian fluid, life in its most primal form, and he calls it Prometheus fire, the divine gift to humanity. And we hear the alien theme here. Andy takes them into a weapons bay for a couple M44A pulse rifles. And aliens, they were the M41A pulse rifles. So these must be earlier models. Tyler says that these are the same models used by the current Colonial Marines. It seems like he's a guy who wanted to join the Colonial Marines, but he's just stuck in this mining colony. It is aiming assistance and a shoulder mount to redistribute the weight. This whole scene is obviously meant to evoke the scene of Hicks showing Ripley how to use the pulse rifle and aliens. I remember that's the first thing I thought of. One of the concept designers for this film, and he tweeted how the weapons locker was actually an homage to Sid Mead's concept art for Aliens in 1986, which was also seen in the weapons bay of the Sulaco in that film. So they find the hive left by the xenomorph, covering a corridor with outgrowth and hollowed out bodies of scientists, but they do find Kay still alive, but injured, not implanted yet.
I thought there was only one xenomorph. There's
mostly
a bunch of them
in the Alien Queen hive in Aliens. Notice there's this blue laser field.
I didn't get that. I didn't get that
level. This actually comes from the egg chamber in the 1979 film, and it was actually an effect gotten from The Who were rehearsing on the soundstage next door with lasers and mist for their concert show. A xenomorph grabs Tyler and hauls him up. The xenomorph's in her mouth punctures Tyler's head just like it did to Parker in the 1979 film. Rain sends Kay back to the ship and goes back down for Andy. And the way she comes through that elevator door with the pulse rifle strap around her shoulder, the air gusting through her hair, the smoke billowing behind her, just looks just like Ripley going back for Newt in Aliens. Rain finds Andy and removes the evil Weyland-Yutani drive, but Rook refuses to open the door, saying, "I can't lie about your chances, but you have my sympathies," which was Ash's final words in the Alien before they torched him.
Another thing,
I got to you about your chances. You have my sympathies.
Rain
I need to go back and watch the movie.
As the xenomorph warriors close in, so they start telling jokes. Why don't monsters eat clowns? Because they taste funny. I read a book about zero gravity. I just couldn't put it down. And this one inspires Rain to use the station's faulty gravity generators to their advantage. And the semiotic standard here is my favorite symbols: pressurized by artificial gravity and artificial gravity absent. The second one is just a stick figure guy floating upside down. Knowing the acidic blood won't drop down through the hull if there's no gravity, Rain sprays them with pulse rifle fire. There are a few inserts of Kaylee spinning with this crazed look on her face as she's shaking for the recoil to look just like James Cameron shots of Ripley as she fired the pulse rifle at the alien queen's eggs. So now they just have the mere challenge of floating through the acidic blood without letting anything graze them.
I don't think they would have made it
the recoil from the pulse rifle and Newton's third law to push herself out of the way. So they float up the elevator shaft, but the xenomorph grabs Rain. She shoots it, but doesn't get any acid on herself, which, you know, I feel bad for the Marines and aliens for whom that would happen anytime they fired. But there are consequences, because the acid does burn a hole in the gate, which opens up a xenomorph to grab her later and unleash several more up the shaft. But now with gravity restored, Andy releases the elevator to wipe out all the others, and then Andy shoots one last space hugger that leaps out at Rain, and then the xenomorph going down with it, saying, "Get away from her, you
bitch.
Get away
That
from
was so
her,
funny.
you bitch.
Oh, that was, yes.
But Johnson doesn't deliver
It
Ripley's
makes
big
front,
line from
yeah.
Aliens with
This is
such
why I should've
gusto
watched
that
the first
Sigourney
one.
Weaver did. He says it with a perfectly hesitant stutter that's typical of Andy. It is just perfect. The Renaissance station crashes into the bands, and it looks so sick.
Yeah, I love this
the
scene.
Corvalon
Again,
detaches,
give me a
and
planet
Rain
with some rings.
disconnects
I love
Mother,
it.
and Rook gets chewed up and rock and ice, but we don't see him actually disintegrate. And in the classic horror structure of the 1979 Alien, in 1986's Aliens, just when you think it's all over and everyone's okay, the worst comes. Since Kay had injected the compound, her cryopod becomes critical,
this should have
and Rain
ended
opens it to
right
find her
here,
screaming, and her
but
womb is
they did what they
extraordinarily
did.
large, and we can't show it because YouTube. But Fede Alvarez promised a gross-out horror moment that had never been done in the history of sci-fi cinema before. Though it is similar to like Dawn of the Dead, where there was like the zombie baby. I guess what happens after the birth has never happened in cinema before.
Yeah.
So Kay gives birth to a pod, and then Rain rips out the umbilical cord, and we are reminded of Shaw's cesarean section operation in Prometheus. But if it wasn't aborted, Rain runs off with the pod to try to kill it with cryofuel, but it opens and not into a xenomorph. That is the face of like a baby engineer.
Yeah.
And the acid melts this cradle through the walkway. She
That was
finds the pod
creepy.
empty in the mineral bay and follows handprints as it grows
Dude,
larger.
that thing grew in
reminded of, like a rapid evolutionary of the first fish to climb onto land. But above,
in like
Andy
5
finds
minutes.
Kay, whose breasts are now emitting this mucusy breast milk. It's like, ugh, what's gonna eat that? And then we see it. The Offspring, this movie calls it. Ugh. So the Offspring was deliberately designed to look like a freakish form of an
Looked like the
engineer,
Shy Guy
but with
SCP,
a taller,
what I'm talking
lankier
about.
appearance and acidic blood and an inner mouth on the end of its tongue, all evocative of the xenomorph. Fede Alvarez wanted to merge the visual concept of the engineer with the visual concept of the xenomorph. He did admit it is similar to the xenomorph human hybrid birthed from Ripley 8 in Resurrection, but that was not in his mind when he was designing this. So, despite David's tinkering with the compound to produce the neomorphs in Alien Covenant, we learn here that when the compound mixes with human DNA in this particular way, it kind of reverts to the source code, which is the engineers who created us. It just shows that the creation of the xenomorphs is a specific bit of artistry that just doesn't happen by accident. It requires some kind of divine insight that David had just by knowing the engineer species. Since human beings are derived from engineers, this kind of unlocked that, but it contained traces of the xenomorph because its black goo was derived from the XX-121.
Yep.
This Offspring was played by former Romanian basketball player Robert Bobrovsky, who is 7'7". And yeah, the fact that these xenomorph anatomical features come from something with ultimately a humanoid face and pale skin makes this even more disturbing. At one point he smiles and I'm like, why are you smiling? But it is cool to show the metallic teeth because these things are not just organic, they are like biomechanical creations. So Rain finds his Offspring, I guess you could say, breastfeeding from Kay, draining her life, like the Saray painting, like Romulus and Remus suckling from the wolf mother, and we see this xenomorph tail filling out. It is now doubled in size. Earlier, Kay said that the father of this baby was some asshole as she wore a Virgin Mary necklace, and I feel like there might be some sacrilegious parallel there, where the father was really the company who considered themselves God. Weyland-Yutani, Peter Weyland, the assholes trying to play God to produce the perfect organism, but in doing so, really just creating a freak that is neither God nor demon. Like Ripley at the end of the 1979 film, Rain climbs into a spacesuit. She grabs the cable that Andy passed before, and when the Offspring stops her from manually releasing the cargo with a second lever, she kicks over his cradle pod to release the acid and chew through the hull. And there's one final scare as the Offspring jumps on her. In this tangle, her cable catches that second lever, releasing the entire cargo bay into the band.
All that sand coming out that fast with a sand blaster would have tore away that cable on her
suit. The cargo bay grinds against the rings of ice and rock. Behind it is what is left of the Renaissance space station, which makes me a bit worried for whatever could be left inside of that. Of
crashing down,
or the compound, or the xenomorphs that are still on that space station that could collide with the Offspring, because we learned in this movie that space does not kill these things. And the Corvalon sets course for Ivaga 3. One of my favorite Easter eggs comes right here. The keypad that Rain punches has the same buttons from the Nostromo keypad that we saw in Alien that were created by designer Simon Deering, who printed a bunch of Hindu and Sanskrit terms on these buttons because he was reading Helena Blavatsky's The Second Doctrine while he was filming this, and that book tries to explain the origin of the universe in terms derived from the Hindu concept of cyclical development. And specifically, you can see two buttons here. Yoni, which is an abstract representation of the Hindu goddess Shakti, Sanskrit for womb, and Pranic Lift 777. Prana is the Sanskrit word for life force. It's one of the most random details in the 1979 Alien film, and the fact that the Romulus team had such attention to detail to include this here is insane to me, and I love it because they end the film with this kind of message that life comes from the womb, which is a bit of a nice palate cleanser after the horrific abomination animation example of that we just saw in the final minutes. So Rain goes to sleep and leaves a cryolog that takes us out, just like the voice of Ripley in the 1979 and 1986 films. Just as the Echo probe came from darkness in the opening shot, now the Corvalon disappears into that same darkness. Let me know what you thought about Alien Romulus. How does it rank with the other Alien films? Comment down below with your thoughts.
I enjoyed this movie. A lot of stuff I missed because I haven't watched the movie in years, and I'm not that deep into the lore. Shout out to my boy Shifty over there. He loves this stuff. But no, I really enjoyed this movie. I think I'm gonna do a rewatch of Alien and Aliens, just to kind of get a refresher. And I'm gonna see any books. I might dive into some books and get into the lore of this world because yeah, I'm really, this movie kind of sparked my interest into this whole universe and everything. So yeah, thanks again to Mr. Eric Voss and New Rockstars for breaking it down for us like always. If you have seen Alien Romulus, let me know what your thoughts on the movie were. Like me and my boy Robert Storm, his channel Robert Storm, we both said that it was a 7.5. Check out his review of the movie. We both kind of have the same opinion on it. We really enjoyed the movie. But yeah, till then, guys, yeah, leave your thoughts down below, like, comment, all that good stuff, and I will see you when I see you. Peace.